You arrived 2 hours early. You always do. Security took 12 minutes. Your gate does not board for another hour and 45. And yet, somehow, by the time you sit down at that gate, you are holding a coffee you did not plan to buy, a bottle of perfume you will probably regret, and a boarding pass that costs $40 more than the number you remember seeing when you booked it. You did not decide any of this on purpose. Someone else did. Months before you ever searched for a flight, this is the modern airport terminal, and it is one of the most precisely engineered retail environments most people will ever walk through. Disguised as a place you are simply passing on your way somewhere else, start with a number most travelers never think to ask about. In the United States, close to 46% of total airport revenue now comes from something called non-aeronautical income, according to industry benchmarking data collected by Airports Council International. Not landing fees, not gate charges, not anything to do with the actual business of moving airplanes. Parking, real estate, food, and retail. Nearly half of the money that keeps a major airport financially alive comes from what happens to you between the security checkpoint and the boarding door. Once you understand that, the layout stops looking accidental. A 2024 study published in the Journal of Air Transport Management conducted by researchers Wu, Morlotti, and Mantin across 89 United States airports found something specific. A 10% increase in passenger dwell time, the amount of time you spend inside the terminal before boarding, was associated with a 5% increase in non-aeronautical revenue, not proportionally, directly. The longer you are physically present inside that building with nothing else to do, the more money the airport makes, and airports have known this for a long time. The effect was not identical everywhere. The study found that dwell time only translated into revenue at certain terminal shapes, specifically linear and finger pier designs, where you are forced to walk a defined path to reach your gate. Concourse-style terminals, where movement is more open and less funneled, showed no significant effect at all. In other words, the shape of the building itself determines whether your walking time can be converted into spending. That is not a detail airport architects overlook. It is frequently the entire point of the design brief. This connects to something researchers Uphold and Casarda documented in their 2006 study on the scale of American airport retail. Airports are not incidentally placed near shops. The physical footprint of retail space inside a terminal is calculated the same way a shopping mall calculates square footage per anchor tenant based on projected foot traffic and average dwell time, not based on what travelers actually request. And the retail itself is unusually profitable. Airport concessions routinely generate over $1,000 in revenue per square foot, more than double what a typical suburban shopping mall earns in the same space, according to industry retail benchmarking data. You are not just walking past shops. You are walking past some of the highest yield retail real estate in the entire consumer economy, and the only reason it works is that you cannot simply leave and go somewhere cheaper. This is the first mechanism worth naming clearly. Once you clear security, you are a captive audience in the most literal sense the term has ever applied to a shopping environment. There is no competitor's storefront across the street. There is no walking away to think it over. There is only forward, toward your gate, through whatever has been placed in your path. But being trapped is not enough on its own. A trapped person who is anxious does not spend money. A trapped person who is calm does. This is where the psychology gets more specific. Marketing researcher Mary Jo Bitner's 1992 concept of the Servicescape, published in the Journal of Marketing, describes how the physical environment of a commercial space is deliberately engineered to produce either approach behavior, staying, browsing, spending, or avoidance behavior, leaving as quickly as possible. Lighting, music, layout, and even air temperature are treated as controllable levers that shift a person from one state to the other. Notice what happens the moment you clear security. The lighting often shifts. The tension of the checkpoint, the shoes, the belt, the scanner gives way to something warmer, calmer, more retail adjacent. This is not a coincidence of building codes. It is the deliberate creation of what the industry sometimes calls a decompression zone, a transition space specifically designed to shift you from the high arousal, anxious state of security, screening into the calm, approach-oriented state that Bitner's research identifies as the psychological precondition for spending. You are not just walking into duty-free. You are being emotionally reset first, so that you arrive there in the correct state to buy something. The layout compounds this. The path from security to your gate is rarely a straight line. It bends, deliberately around retail zones, so that reaching your gate means passing through, not around, the highest margin real estate in the building. This uses the same wayfinding logic that urban theorist Kevin Lynch described in his influential 1960 work on city design, where he introduced the concept of legibility, how easily a person can form a mental map of an unfamiliar space. Airports apply legibility unevenly on purpose. Signage toward your gate is clear and frequent. Signage away from retail zones, back toward exits or quieter corridors, is often sparse by comparison. The space is legible exactly where the airport wants you to go, and quietly less legible everywhere else. Then there's the ticket itself, which was never really one price to begin with. Researchers Morwitz, Greenleaf, and Johnson published a landmark 1998 study in the Journal of Marketing Research on something called partitioned pricing, the practice of splitting a single purchase into a base price plus mandatory or optional add-on charges, rather than one combined total. Their research found that partition prices measurably decrease how much people recall paying overall and increase the likelihood that people complete the purchase in the first place. A seat selection fee here, a baggage charge there, a priority boarding upgrade offered separately at checkout. Each one processed as its own small decision rather than added into a single number your brain would have flinched at seeing all at once. This is compounded by a mechanism most travelers recognize instantly once it is named. The seat map that shows only 2 seats remaining at this price. The boarding group assigned a number instead of a time. The upgrade offer that expires in a countdown timer before you finish checking in. This is scarcity messaging, documented extensively by psychologist Robert Cialdini in his 1984 book on the principles of persuasion. Scarcity does not just describe a real shortage, it manufactures urgency strong enough to override a traveler's normal price sensitivity, and airlines apply it at nearly every stage of the booking and boarding process. So by the time you are standing at your gate, several separate systems have already worked on you in sequence. A ticket price that was never really one number, a boarding process engineered around manufactured urgency, a terminal shaped specifically to convert your idle time into revenue, a decompression zone designed to shift your emotional state from anxious to receptive, and a retail path laid out to be legible only where the airport wants your feet to go. There is a deeper reason all of this works as well as it does, and it has less to do with money and more to do with identity. Anthropologist Marc Augé introduced the concept of the non-place in his 1992 work on what he called supermodernity. A non-place is an environment, an airport, a highway, a hotel lobby, where a person exists in transit, disconnected from the ordinary social identity, relationships, and history that normally anchor decision-making. Inside a non-place, Augé argued, people become temporarily anonymous, defined only by their function as a passenger, a customer, a traveler. Ordinary rules of restraint, the ones that hold at home, in a familiar supermarket, among people who know you, quietly loosen. This is why the $40 bottle of duty-free perfume feels almost reasonable at the airport in a way it never would at your local pharmacy. You are, in a very real psychological sense, briefly a different person inside that terminal, untethered from your ordinary spending identity. The airport did not create that feeling, but it has been extraordinarily well designed to profit from it. So what do you actually do with this? The fix is not to feel foolish about the coffee or the perfume or the extra legroom you did not plan on buying. Your response was not a personal failure of discipline. It was a predictable reaction to an environment engineered by people who understood exactly how dwell time, decompression zones, legibility, and partition pricing interact, tested across decades of retail and behavioral research. The fix is to make your decisions before you enter the non-place, not inside it. Decide what you are actually willing to spend on food, on any incidental purchase, before you clear security while you are still fully yourself. If a seat, a bag, or a boarding priority genuinely matters to you, decide that in advance too, at home with the full price in view, not as a sequence of small add-ons appearing one at a time during checkout. And if you notice yourself moving calmly, almost pleasantly, through a retail corridor you did not intend to walk through, that calm is not an accident. It was manufactured specifically to get you there. You arrived 2 hours early. You always do. And now you know that the coffee, the perfume, and the $40 extra were never really about how much time you had to kill. They were about how carefully that time had already been designed long before you ever walked through the door.